Hello and welcome to German Lessons with Mr. Ferguson. Hallo und herzlich willkommen zum Deutschunterricht mit Herrn Ferguson. Diese Stunde über die Zeitformen, This Tenses Lesson, heißt, wie man das Imperfekt mit den Verben haben und sein benutzt. How to use the imperfect tense with the verbs haben and sein. Before wir anfangen, please remember to like this video. Bitte klickt Gefällt mir and to subscribe to my channel so that I can keep helping you with your German. Bitte vergesst nicht zu abonnieren. If you'd like to support my work, please buy me a coffee by clicking the banner now. Many thanks for your support. Vielen Dank. To understand this lesson, it's important that you understand how the verbs haben and sein work in the present tense. So if you aren't sure how these work, you can start by learning all about haben in the present tense by clicking the banner now. So, what is the imperfect? It's one of the two main past tenses in German, the other being the perfect tense, which you can learn about by clicking this banner now. We tend to use the imperfect tense in writing in German, and so you'd likely encounter this tense when reading a news article or novel, as opposed to the perfect tense, which is primarily used in speech. That being said, there are a few verbs which are more commonly encountered in the imperfect tense than in the perfect tense, primarily due to simplicity, and these are haben, sein, geben, for use with the imperfect form of es gibt, meaning there is or there are, and modal verbs. The verb geben and the modal verbs will be looked at in more detail in later videos, so keep an eye out for those. It's important to recognise that there's no real difference in the translation of the two tenses. The English sentence, I went to the shops, can be translated using either the imperfect or the perfect tense. The imperfect tense is also known as the simple past tense. This is a somewhat misleading name as it's a little harder to guess an irregular imperfect tense form of a verb than it is to guess a verb's past participle, which is what's needed for the perfect tense. It's called the simple past tense because it requires only one verb in its past tense form, and this makes it much more similar to English. For example, I run, I ran. I eat, I ate. I jump, I jumped. It's important to learn about the imperfect tense of haben and sein first, as these are the most common verbs that you'll encounter in German. You can also use the imperfect forms of haben and sein as auxiliary or helping verbs in order to form something called the pluperfect tense, which will be discussed in a later video. To conjugate haben in the imperfect, we use the irregular stem hat and add the following endings. For ich, add te. Ich hatte. I had. For du, add test. Du hattest. You had in an informal singular sense. For sie, es, and man, add te. Notice that in this tense, the third person singular form, sie, es, and man, is identical to the ich form. So, hatte, he had, sie hatte, she had, es hatte, it had, and man hatte, one had. For wir, we add ten, wir hatten, we had. For ihr, add tet, ihr hattet, you had in an informal plural sense. And for sie and sie, we copy what we did for wir, which is always the case. So we add ten. Sie hatten, you had in a formal sense, and sie hatten, they had. Some examples of the verb haben in the imperfect tense are Ich hatte Spaß, I had fun. Wir hatten keine Hausaufgaben, we didn't have any homework, or literally, we had no homework. Hattest du Fieber? Did you have a fever in an informal singular sense? Mein Bruder hatte Hunger. My brother was hungry. Or, literally, my brother had hunger. It's important to mention here that the imperfect tense of the verb haben creates sentences with had, but this often gets confused with had to. For example, you can use haben in the imperfect to translate I had my birthday. Ich hatte Geburtstag. But not to translate I had to buy a cake. The verb had to comes from the modal verb müssen, which means to have to, and that will be discussed in the imperfect tense with modal verbs video. The verb sein is irregular in all tenses, and if you haven't learnt this verb in the present tense yet, you can do that by clicking this banner now. As sein is irregular, we simply have to learn its forms in the imperfect too. We can, however, learn the imperfect pattern, which will help us as we learn more verbs in this tense. The pattern I'm referring to is as follows. The ich form is something we have to learn. For sein, it's ich war, I was. The du form is the ich form with an added st. For sein, it's therefore du warst, you were, in an informal singular sense. As mentioned during the explanation of haben in the imperfect, the third person singular sie, es and man forms of the verb are identical to the ich form. And so that's war, he was, sie war, she was, es war, it was, and man war, one was. The wir form is the ich form with an added en or n if the ich form already ended in e like it did with ich hatte. For sein, we take the ich form and add en. Wir waren, we were. The ihr form is the ich form with an added t, so ihr wart, you were, in an informal plural sense. And we know that the sie and sie forms of the verb are identical to the wir form. So sie waren, you were in a formal sense, and sie waren, they were. Let's look at both verbs that we've covered so far so that I can provide a more visual explanation of the pattern. The first part of the rule is that the ich and the sie, es and man forms of the verb are identical in the imperfect tense. We can also see regular verb endings in the du, wir, ihr, sie and sie forms of the verbs. The standard present tense verb ending for du is st, and you can see that here. The regular present tense ending for wir verbs is en, which you can again see. The standard present tense ending for ihr verbs is t. And sie verbs regularly end in en, mirroring wir. Some examples of sein in use are Mein Bruder war krank. My brother was ill. Es war furchtbar. It was awful. Waren deine Freunde da? Were your friends there, in an informal singular sense? Wie war Ihr Urlaub? How was your holiday, in a formal sense? And two final examples which use both verbs in the same sentence. Ich hatte ein Haustier, als ich jünger war. I had a pet when I was younger. Or I had a pet back when I was younger. Wir waren müde, weil wir viel Arbeit hatten. We were tired because we had lots of work. So that's how to use the verbs haben and sein in the imperfect tense, along with some examples of how these can be used in sentences. Remember, the imperfect tense is generally used in writing rather than speaking, but that you would more commonly hear the imperfect versions of haben and sein, along with some other verbs, because they are much more simple to use. It's a good idea to pause the video now to recap how these verbs work in the imperfect tense. Habe ich etwas vergessen? If you're a native German speaker and think I've forgotten something important about using haben and sein in the imperfect tense, please let me know in the comments. Bitte schreibt einen Kommentar. Also, please remember to click subscribe to receive all of my German lesson videos, language learning tips, and updates. You can support my work by donating at www.co-fi.com/Herr Ferguson, and you can follow me for more German language insights on Instagram under the username Herr Ferguson. Otherwise, from me, it's Danke und auf Wiedersehen.